Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Dalet, and Mirat Hashem today we will be learning Daf Reish Mem Zayin Amid Beis. Boy, I always say the pasuk says Lev Chacham Liyamin. The heart of a wise person goes to the right. Lev Ksil, the heart and the mind of a foolish person goes l'smoil, goes to the left. So I like to always apply that to when you're learning. Lev Chacham Liyamin. A Chacham looks to the right side of the Sefer and takes a look at, wow, look how much we've accomplished over here. Lev Ksil, the foolish person, goes to the left and he says, when am I ever going to get anything done? There's so much left. It's hard for me to believe that we're holding our Daf Reish Mem Zayin, and we've done all of this of Chelik Dalet. I remember when we were just finishing Chelik Gimel, and we were celebrating finishing Chelik Gimel and getting ready to get into Chelik Dalet, and now, wow, look how much of Chelik Dalet we have Baruch Hashem accomplished. So Mir Hashem, today we will be learning Daf Reish Mem Zayin Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn the very complex, fascinating halachas of Iruvei Chatzeros, and we're going to begin today 2 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch on Reish Mem Zayin Amid Aleph with the new Siman Shin Pei Dine Bitul Rishus, the halachas that govern one member, one resident in a Chatzer being mevatel his Rishus, giving away his rights in the Chatzer, maybe even in his bias, to the other Bnei HaChatzer to negate an issue with the Iruvei Chatzeros. Our learning today should be a schos for Achenu Beis Yisrael, Hanasuna Batzaru Bashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Alehem, V'yetziam Yitzar Lervacha Me'afelu La'ira Mishibur L'Geula, Hashta Bagala Uvizman Kariv and Emar Amen. Our learning should be a schos for Fuah Shalema, for Achia Gadol, Meshamer Ben Esther Fradel, Yitzchak Ben Tzion Ben Dusha, Rivka Bashir Aleach, Havadasa Bas Rezel Serel, Yeshua Levi Ben Ahuva Malkachana, and Yerucham Ben Masha. They should all have a refuah shalema b'soich shar chayle Yisrael. So, okay, let's pick up with Siman Shin Pei, Dine Bittel Rishus, Uboy Dalet Seifim. Here we have 4 Seifim. Starts off the Mechaber Sif Aleph. Echad mibnei hachatzer. You have one resident who lives in the Chatzer, Sheshachach, who forgot, V'loi Erev im ha'acherim. He did not join the Iruvei Chatzeros with everybody else. So you've got your Chatzer. Let's say we've got 4 residents in the Chatzer: Ruvain, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. They went around, they collected pas to make it Iruvei Chatzeros and put the pas in one of the homes in the Chatzer so that they should all be joined together, and it should be mutter to be metaltal from the bias to the Chatzer, from the Chatzer to the bias, etc., etc. Ruvain contributed to the Erev, Shimon contributed to the Erev, Levi wasn't home, Yehuda contributed to the Erev. Somebody gave a message to Levi, you didn't contribute to the Iruvei Chatzeros. It's only Tuesday. Yeah, I'll take care of it. Comes along, Shabbos, he forgot to contribute to the Iruvei Chatzeros. Now we've got a big problem. Now we have 2 entities in this Chatzer. We've got Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda. They're joined as one, they're unified by virtue of the Iruvei Chatzeros. But then you've got Levi, who didn't join the Iruvei Chatzeros. So now you've got a Chatzer serving multiple entities, and now Tiltal in this Chatzer, Keli Sheshavas Babayis, Bayis to Chatzer, Keli Sheshavas B'Chatzer, Chatzer to Bayis, from one house to another, is going to Aser, because Levi, the one who did not contribute to the Iruvei Chatzeros, is Asering on the other Bnei HaChatzer. So Echad B'nei HaChatzer Sheshachach V'loi Irev im ha'acherim Oyser Alehem, he's going to Aser on the other Bnei HaChatzer. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cut in Aleph, Sheshachach V'loi Erev. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Nakat Sheshachach. For some reason, the Mechaber saw fit to present the case as a member of the Chatzer who forgot to join the Iruvei Chatzeros. Why? Says the Chavetz Chaim, for a very strong reason. Lashmi'inan, to teach us a chiddush. Da'afilu b'kahai gavna, even in such a case where Levi really intended on joining the Iruvei Chatzeros. Levi had nothing against joining the Iruvei Chatzeros. He simply forgot to do so. Afilu b'kahai gavna oiser kishaloi bitel. He still asers on everybody else. We don't look and say, well, really, he intended to be part of the Iruvei Chatzeros. He doesn't want his rishus to be outside of the Iruvei Chatzeros. He wants to be part of it. He only forgot. No, there's no leeway. There's no wiggle room. He didn't join. He didn't join. But you should know, don't think for a minute that what the Mechaber is telling you is that the Eitzah that he's about to give, the way to rectify the situation of Bittul Rishus, you might think maybe Bittul Rishus is a kula that works when the only thing that happened was Levi forgot. Levi forgot, okay, we'll be makel, we'll allow him to be Mavatal Rishus to the other Bnei HaChatzer, and that will work. But if Levi b'mezid didn't join the Eruv Chatzeros, maybe then you'll say, no. You can't rectify that with Bittul Rishus, la'achar hamaisa. No, too late. You were b'mezid, you didn't join, now we're not going to be makel and allow you to rectify the situation with Bittul Rishus. No, it works even b'mezid. So that when the Mechaber says, Echad b'mnei HaChatzer sheshachach v'lo yirev, there's really two, he's telling me over here, even shachach is a problem. Don't think shachach is not a problem. Shachach is a problem, but the Eitzah of Bittul Rishus even works b'mezid. Says the Mishnah Berurah Beis Oyser Aleihem. What does it mean that he asers on the other Bnei HaChatzer? L'taltal mibateim l'chatzer. It means, we know this by Reish Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, the fact that Levi asers on the other Bnei HaChatzer means no one's going to be allowed to be metaltal, keli sheshavas babayis to the Chatzer, etc., etc. Okay, so here we have the problem. Echad b'mnei HaChatzer sheshachach v'liyir v'macherim Oyser Aleihem. Asks the Mechaber, is there a way to rectify the situation? Ma takonosam. What could you do to rectify the situation so that the people in the Chatzer should be able to take their Mishnayisen that started off Shabbos in the house and bring it out to the Chatzer for the Pirkei Avos Drasha? Ma takonosam. What could you do? Says the Mechaber, Yevatal lehem rishusai. Levi has to be mevatal his rishus to the other Bnei HaChatzer. Levi has to come along and say, I am relinquishing my rights in the Chatzer. I'm giving my rights in the Chatzer over to you. How does he do that? Sheyomar, he has to say, Rishusi, my rights, my ownership, so to speak, in the Chatzer, Mivuteles lachem, is bottled to you, Oy kinui lachem, or I am giving it over to you. You're acquiring my rights in the Chatzer. Now, let's pause here a second. So what exactly does this accomplish? So let's just play it out in our minds. The problem over here is Ruvain, Shimon, Yehuda. They joined as one unified entity in this Chatzer by virtue of their Eruvei Chatzeros. Problem, Levi didn't join. Levi is now a separate entity. So now in this Chatzer, we have a Chatzer that is serving two entities. The Chatzer is serving Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda, unified by their Eruvei Chatzeros. It's also serving Levi, who was left out. What's the Eitzah? Levi is mevatel his rishus, which we are going to see. We paskin, what that means is he's relinquishing his rights. He's being mesalik himself. He's removing himself from the Chatzer. He's being mevatel to Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda. So now the Chatzer is no longer serving two entities because he no longer has rishus in the Chatzer. He gave it to Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda. So now you have Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda are unified being a Eruvei Chatzeros, and the Chatzer only serves them. I look across the Chatzer and you see Levi's house. So there's somebody else living in the Chatzer. Yeah, but he has no rights in the Chatzer. So the Chatzer is not serving him. The Chatzer is only serving them. So now the Eruvei Chatzeros can be in effect, and Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda will be able to be metaltal from their houses to the Chatzer and vice versa. We're going to see that Levi cannot. We've already mentioned this earlier. Levi cannot transfer a Keli Sheshavas Babayis out to the Chatzer. Why? Because he's transferring from one Rishos HaYachid to another Rishos HaYachid from his house to the Chatzer with whom he is not Ureves. He's not part of the Eruvei Chatzeros. He won't be able to transfer, but they can. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Now, Levi is being mevatel his rishus to the other Bnei HaChatzer. Do we have to make some kind of kinyan? Does there have to be a formal act of kinyan, of acquisition, that somehow the other Bnei HaChatzer are acquiring his rights? Says the Mechaber, no. Ve'ein tzarich liknos b'kinyan suder. Don't think you have to make a kinyan suder. What's a kinyan suder? A suder literally is a turban or a handkerchief, a cloth, right? When you do mechiras chametz with the Rav, so the Rav takes a pen, right? And he gives you his pen, and you make a kinyan on his pen, and when you acquire his pen, he's getting your chametz so that he'll be able to sell your chametz to the Ein Yehudi. That's a kinyan suder. You might think that in order to make this happen, maybe Levi needs to make a kinyan suder with the other residents of the chutzner. There has to be some formal act of acquisition whereby they acquire his rights. Says the Mechaber, no, ve'ein tzarich liknos b'kinyan suder. You don't need any kind of kinyan suder. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Gimel, ve'ein tzarich liknos b'kinyan suder. The Mishnah Berurah explains why that is. Because there's no real acquisition going on here. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Duhurak siluk rishusa ba'alma. What's going on over here is not some kind of business transaction. Levi is not selling or giving b'matana or anything else, giving away his rights to the other b'nei HaChatzer. What he's doing is he's removing himself. He's relinquishing his rights. But there's no actual act of kinyan, of acquisition going on here. Durak siluk rishusa ba'alma, shemesalik atzmei me rishusai, kedei shalo ye'esar aleihem. He's relinquishing his rights so that he should be a non-entity in the chutzner, and he shouldn't aser on anybody else. Now, before we read the rest of the Mishnah Berurah, let's see the next words in the Mechaber. Turning back to Reish Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, says the Mechaber, V'yachal levatel af mishetech. And for this reason, you could do this even after Shabbos began. Even after dark on Friday night, you're allowed to do this. If you realize Friday night, hey, wait a second, we don't really have it in Rivik Hatzeres. Levi forgot to join. All right, we'll do Bittul Rishus. Levi will come and it'll be Mavatal Rishus. If it was a formal act of Kinyan, well, Mekach and Memkar are usher on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do business transactions on Shabbos. But this is not a real Mekach Memkar. It's not a real transaction. It's only Siluk Rishus. And that's why if we go back into Mishnah Berurah's Katan Gimel on Reish Mem Zayin Amud Beis, right by the Ois Katan Gimel for the Sharat Tzion, says the Mishnah Berurah, Umei Hai Taima, and for this reason, Mutal Levatal Af Mishetachshach. That's why you're allowed to do this even after dark, even when it's Shabbos, because it's not an act of Mekach Memkar. Okay, let's go weiter in the Mechaber, top of Reish Mem Zayin Amud Beis. So this is very, very important. Says the Mechaber, V'im dar im arba oy chamisha. Let's say, in our case, I said that there are 4 residents in the chutzner, right? Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. If there are multiple residents in the chutzner, v'im dar im arba oy chamisha, if he's living together with 4 or 5 other or more residents in the chutzner, tzarich levatel l'chal echad ve'echad. He has to go be mevatel rishus to each one of them. So he needs to go to Ruvain, I'm being mevatel rishus to you. He needs to go to Shimon, I'm being mevatel rishus to you. He needs to go to Yehuda, I'm being mevatel rishus to you. Okay? Sheyomar, he needs to say, Rishusi, my rishus, mivuteles, is nullified. I'm being masalik myself. Lecha, to you, ulecha, and to you, ulecha, and to you. He has to be mevatel rishus to each one. Now, this is very, very interesting. And we're going to have to see the Mishnah Berurah and also a Bir Halacha. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Daled, l'chal echad ve'echad, he has to be mevatel rishus to each one. First thing the Mishnah Berurah says is, why does he have to go to each one? V'loyam rinan, we do not say, that when he was mevatel rishus to one, let's say Levi went to Ruvain and he said, yeah, you're right, I forgot, I'm mevatel rishus to you. We don't say that when he does that, daitoi, his intent is levatel l'chol b'nei HaChatzer. He's really being mevatel rishus to all the b'nei HaChatzer, kedei shelo yeser aleim, so that he shouldn't aser on them. Umasha amar le'echad mehem, and this that he only said it to Reuven and he didn't say it to Shimon and to Yehuda is not because he doesn't want to be mevatel rishus to Shimon and Yehuda. He knows, he understands the problem. He realizes that he has to be mevatel rishus, so he shouldn't aser on the other b'nei HaChatzer. He gets that. Why did he only say it to Ruvain? Bimkam kulam amaloi. He said it to Ruvain kind of as a representative of everybody else. He didn't see the need. All I have to do is express my intent and my desire that I want to be Mavat Rishus to everybody. Why do I got to go around the chutzner, knock on everybody's door, and be Matriach everybody in the middle of their Friday night Suda? Right? Why do I have to be Matriach myself to run around the chutzner and tell it to everybody? I was Megala Das. I let it be known that I want to be Mavat Rishus. So I only told Reuven. I didn't tell everybody. No, we don't say that. Now, the Gemara says that the reason we don't say that is very fascinating. Hamevatel ba'ayin ra hu mevatel. Bottom line is that what this person is doing is he's being mevatel rishus, right? He's relinquishing rights. Now, you might look at this and you might be tempted to say, hey, this is a formality, like what's the big deal? Like, really, what's the downside? What does it cost him to go ahead and be mevatel rishus, right? No. People do not relinquish rights easily. Even when they just have to say the words, I'm being mevatel rishus, they don't do it easily. They do it ba'ayin ra. They do it with a tight-fisted mindset. And therefore, when somebody says to Ruvain, I'm mevatel rishus to Ruvain, we can't just assume that he's being mevatel rishus to Shimon and Yehud also. He said it to Ruvain, he was mevatel rishus to Ruvain. And that doesn't work. He has to be mevatel rishus to everybody. Now, before we see the rest of this Mishnah Berurah, I want to take a look at a Bir Halacha. That's going to be Bir Halacha Dibra Maschel Tzarech Levatel L'chol Echad Ve'echad. But before we even see the Bir Halacha inside, I hope some of you already realized the question over here, right? Let's remember. Mechanics. Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda, they joined in a Eruv Chatzeres. Okay. Levi was left out. Levi goes now to Ruvain, and he's mevatel rishus to Ruvain. We're worried, well, wait a second. He was only mevatel rishus to Ruvain. We're saying he has to be mevatel rishus to each one of the Bnei HaChatzer. Well, wait a second, why? Right now, there are only two entities in this Chatzer. There's Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda unified by an Eruv Chatzeres, and there's Levi. If Levi is mevatel rishus to Ruvain, Ruvain is already unified by an Eruv Chatzeres together with Shimon and Yehuda. So why does Levi have to be mevatel rishus to Shimon and to Yehuda individually? He was already mevatel rishus to one of the members that are unified by the Eruv. Doesn't his rishus automatically become incorporated into that unified group? Why do we need him to be mevatel rishus to each one? That's what the Bir Halacha tackles over here in Dibra Maschel Tzarech Levatel L'chol Echad Ve'echad. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ayin Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Dalet. Take a look at Mishnah Berurah's Katan Dalet. Va'alfagav dehai debatalei erevim chaveroi. Even though if Levi is only mevatel rishus to Ruvain, he's being mevatel rishus to somebody who's already incorporated with Shimon and Yehuda, so they're one entity, right? So what's the problem? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, no, it doesn't work. You know why? Ki erev me esmail. When was the erev made? The erev was made before the bittul rishus happened. Therefore, says the Chavetz Chaim, ki erev me esmail. When Ruvain joined the Eruv Chatzeres yesterday, or whenever they made the Eruv Chatzeres, adaita dehai chiluka le erav. This new rishus that he just got from Ruvain was not part of that Eruv Chatzeres. When Ruvain joined with Shimon and Yehuda in the Eruv Chatzeres, Ruvain gave pas for the rishus that he has at that moment in time. Now, on Friday night, when Levi comes and is mevatel rishus to Ruvain, that, so to speak, new rishus that Ruvain just acquired is not incorporated in the Eruv Chatzeres, because the Eruv Chatzeres came before that. So it doesn't go into that. So now, it's very nice that Ruvain now has, so to speak, Levi's rishus, but Shimon and Yehuda don't. So there's still multiple entities in this Chatzer. There's Ruvain. Now, Ruvain happens to have Levi's rishus, but when it comes to Shimon and it comes to Yehuda, they're not joined together with Levi's rishus. How should they be joined together with Levi's rishus? It's very nice that Ruvain has it, but Ruvain is kind of split into two. There's Ruvain's own rishus that he always had that got incorporated into the Yeruv Chatzeres together with Shimon and Yehuda. Then Ruvain happens to have another asset, another holding that he just got from Levi, but that was left out of the Yeruv Chatzeres. So there's still multiple entities, and that's why there's a problem over here. That's why Levi has to be Mavatal Rishus to each and every member of the Chatzar. Now we come to the rest of the Mishnah Berurah over here, which is equally fascinating. It says the Mishnah Berurah as follows, at the end of Ois Katan Daled. V'im loy bitel lekulam. Let's say Levi, Taka, is only Mavatal Rishus to Reuven. And he's not Mavatal Rishus to all the Bnei HaChatzar. He's never Mavatal Rishus to Shimon and Yehuda. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if that happens, you should know, Af lemi shebitel oser. He brings down for the Maggid Mishnah. If you take a look in Sha'ar Tziyah, this comes from the Maggid Mishnah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you should know, if Levi is only Mavatal Rishus to Reuven, right, not to Shimon and Yehuda, not only are Shimon and Yehuda aser, not only can they not take their Pirkei Avos, that was Shavas Babayis, and bring it out to the Chatzar on Shabbos afternoon, Reuven is also aser. Now that needs a little thought, right? Because obviously what the Mishnah Berurah is telling us is that you would have thought that maybe Reuven is sitting pretty. Maybe Reuven has a good Yeruv Chatzeres. Maybe Reuven can take the Pirkei Avos out to the Chatzar, and it's just Shimon and Yehuda that can't. Kamash Malon the Maggid Mishnah, no, even Reuven can't. What's at work over here? What are the mechanics? So the mechanics are actually quite interesting. The way it seems to work is like this. When you look at the Chatzar from Reuven's perspective, there is now only one entity in this Chatzar. Why? Because there's me, Reuven, right? There's me. I have everything that I always had. I also have Levi, right? Then there's Shimon and Yehuda, but we're all unified by one Yeruv Chatzeres. So where is there another entity? Reuven? Levi? What do you mean? Levi was Mavatal as Rishus to me. There's no Levi. There's no Levi that's external to me. You see, from Reuven's perspective, for Levi to be a non-entity, Levi does not have to be incorporated in the Yeruv Chatzeres. Levi is me. Reuven says, Levi is me. You want to split my assets into two? You want to say that I had my own assets before, and I have a new asset now that I just got from Levi, and it wasn't incorporated in the Yeruv Chatzeres? So what? Kloppe me, from my perspective, from Reuven's perspective, that's not Negeya. Even if I have two different assets, and even if one of my assets was not put into the Yeruv Chatzeres, it's still me. There's no Levi outside of me. So from Reuven's perspective, there's Reuven with all of his assets, Shimon and Levi, unified by the Yeruv Chatzeres. There's no two entities. So you might think that from Reuven's perspective, everything is fine. Shimon and Levi have a problem. Why? Because from Shimon and Levi's perspective, there is a reshus of Levi's that no longer belongs to Levi. It belongs to Reuven, but it's not in the Yeruv Chatzeres. So from Shimon and Levi's perspective, there's one entity, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven meaning Reuven's assets that were incorporated in the Yeruv Chatzeres, but then there's also Reuven's asset, the Rishus of Levi, that was left out of the Yeruv Chatzeres. So that's two entities from their perspective, but not from Reuven's perspective. From Reuven's perspective, there's only one. There's me, unified with Shimon and Yehuda. Kamash Malon, the Mishnah Berurah, that doesn't work. Even Reuven is going to be aser. And in Sha'ar Tziyah, the Chafetz Chaim gives the Maggid Mishnah's explanation. And it's very interesting. It's not because of a flaw in Yeruv Chatzeres. You're right. From Reuven's perspective, the Taka is a good Yeruv Chatzeres. But anyway, it won't work for him. Says the Sha'ar Tziyah, V'atam. This is the second line into Sha'ar Tziyah and Ois Katan Hey. V'atam. The rationale is, Dekevan she'ein chavera yachal etaltal, since Shimon and Yehuda don't have Eruv Chatzeros, and therefore Tiltal is also for them Eruv Gamandalesa. There's no longer an Eruv. Why? The Eruv Shemai. Because what's it called? We've come up against this before. It's called an Eruv. An Eruv is something that combines everybody so that they all have the same status. Everybody's status has to be the same. If everybody's status is not the same, there's no Eruv. So you can't tell me that for Reuven, Taket is an Eruv Chatzeres, he could be a Metaltal, but for Shimon and Yehuda, who are also part of the same Eruv Chatzeres, right? Their status is different. Now, some of you might jump up and say, hold it, Rabbi Weiss, but Levi's status is different, because even after Levi is Mevatel Rishus, we're going to see that Levi's not allowed to be Metaltal from his bias to the Chatzer. Yeah, but Levi's not part of the Eruv Chatzeres. Levi, his house is independent. He relinquished his rights to the Chatzer, so he doesn't answer on everybody else. But he's not really part of the Eruv Chatzeres. So his status could be different. But Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda, who are part of an Eruv Chatzeres, they cannot have different statuses. If they do, it brings down the Eruv. Okay. So far, we see over here the beginning of the Mechaber. The Mechaber tells us somebody forgot, or like the Mishnah Berurah says, or if it was intentional, didn't join the Eruv Chatzeres. The answer is, he could be Mevatel Rishus, he could relinquish his rights in the Chatzer to the other Bnei HaChatzer. Now the Eruv Chatzeres is okay because he's now a non-entity. He doesn't represent a separate entity in the Chatzer. We see the mechanics of this, and we see, said the Mechaber so far, that he has to be Mevatel Rishus to each and every one of the Bnei HaChatzer. HaMevatel, Ba'ayin Ra, U'Mevatel. He has to be Mevatel to each and every one. Now, the Mishnah Berurah brings down a Shita that's more Mekel, says the Mechaber. V'yesh Oimrim, there is a Yesh Oimrim. There are those that say, this is brought down from the Torah, V'yesh Oimrim, that no, he doesn't have to be Mevatel Rishus to each and every one independently. Shedai Sheyomar Rishusi Mevuteles Likulchem. It's enough for him to say, my Rishus is bottled to all of you. He doesn't have to say, to you Reuven, to you Shimon, to you Levi, to you Yehuda. He just says, guys, I'm Mevatel my Rishus to all of you. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in hay. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, if you're telling me that there's a Yesh Omrim that's Mekel, that says that L'kulchem to all of you works, what's the direct implication? Mashma de l'odei Rishona, but according to the first opinion, Loi mahani kisha'amar L'kulchem, right? According to the second opinion, Levi comes in front of Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda, and he says, I'm Mevatel my Rishus to all of you. The Torah says, he's Mekel. He says that works. But according to the Dei Rishona, who said that he has to be Mevatel Rishus to each one, it's not enough for him to stand in front of all of them and say, my Rishus is bottled to all of you. That's not enough. He needs to address each one independently. Reuven, my Rishus is bottled to you. Shimon, my Rishus is bottled to you. Yehuda, my Rishus is bottled to you. It's not enough to stand in front of them and say to all of you. Why not? Why not? What's driving this chumrah? Says the Mishnah Berurah Tam. The reason for this is Kasav Taz. The Taz says the reason is a very interesting reason. Mishum de ba'alma rubai kekulai. We know the golden rule of rubai kekulai, right? Majority is like everything. You got to hear this. This is unbelievable. Valkein, therefore, if Levi stands in front of Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda, and he says, my Rishus is bottled to all of you, maybe he doesn't really mean all of you. After the kavanasai rak al haroiv mehem. Maybe he only means that he's being mevatel rishus to roiv, to the majority of them. Well, there's Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda, that's 3. Roiv is 2. Maybe when Levi said, I'm mevatel my rishus to all of you, he meant rubai kakulai. I'm mevatel my rishus to 2 of you, but I'm leaving one out. Why? Because I'm mevatel rishus ba'ayin rohu mevatel. I don't know. Now, wait a second, says the Mishnah Berurah. Hold it. You're telling me that the Dei Rishona holds that l'kulachem to all of you is no good because Rubai Kekulai. But the Mechaber, in the first opinion, if you turn back to Reish Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, what did he say? when he was describing Bittul Rishus. He said, Sheyoymar Rishusi Mevuteles Lochem. My Rishus is Mevatel to you. Lochem is Lashon Rabim. Lochem is plural. So when the Mechaber was describing the day of Rishona, he actually said that you could be Mevatel Rishus to a plurality, right, to multiple people. I'm Mevatel my Rishus to you, multiple people, Lashon Rabim, right? So how are you telling me now that according to the day of Rishona it doesn't work? Says the Mishnah Berurah, I'll tell you what the Mechaber meant. He's talking about a case where there are only 3 people living in the Chotzer. There's Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. Levi forgot to join the Erev, so now he has to be Mevatel Rishus to who? To Ruvain and Shimon, to only 2 people. In that case, even according to the day of Rishona, he could say Rishusi Mevuteles Lochem, because what's Roiv? 1.5? He meant that he's Mevatel his Rishus to Ruvain and to half of Shimon? That doesn't make sense. Lochem could only mean both of them. So in that case, it's okay. But once there's 3, it doesn't work. Oladina Masika El Yerabba, Halach Lamaisa, the El Yerabba concludes, to Ha'ikr Ka'yesh Oimrim, the Ikr follows the more kuladik opinion of the Yesh Oimrim, to Bahani Gam Kisha Amar L'Kolachem, that it does work if you say L'Kolachem, V'chalzeh Kisha Oimin Neged Kulam, V'amar Lehem Lashon Zeh, but that's only if you're standing in front of all of them. If you're standing in front of all of them, you could say L'Kolachem. But if they're not all there, then you cannot use this Kula. I'm trying to remember. Let me see if I have. Do I have it here? It looks like I don't have my Dirshu Mishnah Berurah over here. There was a very cute. I remember it from last time around. There was a very cute footnote. Kulai. I remember it now. If you want to see how far they take this concept of Rubai Kekulai, we say in Rosh Hashanah davening, we say to the Rabbeinu Shalom, Meloich al kol ha'olam kuloi. We ask that the Rabbeinu Shalom should establish his kingship over kol ha'olam, the entire world, kuloi, all of it. What's this double ocean? Meloich al kol ha'olam. What's Meloich al kol ha'olam? Kuloi. So they want to say, based on this concept, well, somebody might be saying, Meloich al kol ha'olam. Rabbeinu Shalom, I want you to rule over the entire world. But Ruba is kikuloi. Maybe he only means that the Rabbeinu Shalom should rule over 51% of the world. Rubai, because Rubai Kekulai, he wants to leave the other 49% out of the Rabbeinu Shalom's dominion. Chas v'chalila. So we have to say, Meloich al kol ha'olam kulai. Fascinating. Okay. Says the Mechaber, Weiter, second line down near the end of the line. You should know, says the Mechaber, in bitel rishusai stam, in a case where somebody is mevatel rishus, and he does it stam, he does it in a general sense, meaning he says, I'm being mevatel rishus, but he doesn't delineate what he's relinquishing his rights on. He just says, I'm relinquishing my rights. I'm mevatel rishus. In bitel rishusai stam, then like bitel el rishusai sheyesh le b'chotzer. That means he's relinquishing the minimum. He's relinquishing his rights in the chotzer, because that's all he needs to do in order not to aser on everybody else, right? Problem right now is that the chotzer is serving Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda unified as one, and himself, Levi. So in order to help out Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda so that their Eruv should be good, Levi has to relinquish his rights to what? To the chotzer, so that the chotzer is only serving one entity, not 2. So if he's mevatel rishus stam, that's what happens. He's being mevatel rishus only to the chotzer. Hilkach, therefore, once he does that, heim mutarim lahaitzi mibateim lechotzer. Now Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda are allowed to transfer kelim sheshavsu in their houses out to the chotzer. Because, no problem, they have a Ruva Chatzeres. Vegam hu, Levi, is also allowed to transfer Kelim Sheshavsu Babayis in the houses of Ruvain, Shimon, and Yehuda out to the Chotzer. In other words, Ruvain could take his Pirkei Avos out from the house and bring it to the Chotzer. So to Shimon, so to Yehuda. Levi could go to Ruvain's house, borrow a Pirkei Avos from Ruvain, and take it out to the Chotzer. Because he's transferring from Reuven's house to the Chotzer. That's no problem. And Levi, we're going to see, is considered like an Oreach. He's considered like a guest by Reuven. But, Shehu Oreach Ba'alma. Aval, however, Asurin Lahaitzi Mi Beisay Lachotzer, they, Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda, would not be allowed to go into Levi's house and transfer a Keli Sheshavas Babayis in Levi's house and bring it out to the Chotzer, the Gamhu, and Levi also. In other words, transfer from Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda's house out to the Chotzer is mutter for everyone. Reuven, Shimon, Yehuda, and Levi, because why not? They're unified, those three houses, by Neruva Chatzeros. The Chotzer is serving one entity. There's no problem. Even Levi is allowed to do that because Levi is considered a guest by Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda. But nobody is allowed to transfer a Keli Sheshavas Babayis from Levi's house to the Chotzer because Levi's house is a separate Rishus HaYachid. You can't transfer from one Rishus HaYachid to another Rishus HaYachid without any Eruv Chatzeros. And Levi's house is not part of this Eruv Chatzeros. And Levi was not Mavatal Rishus over his house. So his house is cut off. Matter of fact, says the Mechaber, there are those that say Shetzarich Lino Beisai, that Levi has to make sure to keep the door of his house locked, so that nobody should come to accidentally transfer a Keli Sheshavas Babayis from his house to the Chotzer. And he should not unlock and open the door, only when he wants to come in and come out. And he has to make sure to lock the door right after he leaves or right after he comes in, to make sure that no transfer should happen from his house to the Chotzer or vice versa, because that's usher. His house is a separate entity. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Vav. Rishus Stam, when somebody is mevatel his rishus in a general way, certainly if Levi spells out that he's being mevatel his rights to the Chotzer, then certainly he's excluding his house. Ois Katan Zayin, Levi is allowed to transfer from Reuven's house, Shimon's house, Yehuda's house, out to the Chotzer. That's no problem. And the Mechaber said why? Shehu Oreach Ba'alma, because he's considered like a guest. He's a non-entity in the Chotzer. He's there, and he is transferring. Yeah, because he's a guest by Reuven and Shimon and Yehuda. The presence of a guest is not considered an entity to aser on the other Bnei HaChotzer. V'gam heim einam oisrum alav. And the Bnei HaChotzer don't aser on the guest. Ukidal el b'sayv siman shenayin. Ayin sham, we learned this in Shenayin. Ois katan ches. They're not allowed to transfer from Levi's house. Mi beis el HaChotzer. Shaharei lo bitel hem rishus beisai. Because he didn't relinquish the rights over his house. Ois katan tes. V'gam hu. He's also not allowed to transfer from his house to the Chotzer. What the Mechaber wants to say is, Levi's not allowed to transfer from his house to the Chotzer. In other words, you might have had a Havamina. Maybe once Levi is Mevatel Rishus to the other Bnei HaChotzer, so now Levi is completely a guest in the Chotzer. So now, we learned earlier, right? If somebody's a guest in a guest house in the Chotzer, he's not Nigeya to the Eruv Chatzeros. He doesn't have to be part of the Eruv Chatzeros. And if there is an Eruv Chatzeros, he's allowed to transfer from the house that he's a guest in out. So maybe we should look at Levi as being a guest in his own home. Maybe he's completely a guest in the Chotzer. Says the Mishnah, you can't say that. You can't make a person a guest in his own house. He didn't relinquish his rights on his house. So he's living in his house. He's not a guest. So he can't transfer from his house to the Chotzer. Ois Katan Yud, we have this Yesh Oimrim that's very machber that says Shetzarich Lino Beisai, that he has to lock up his house for Tzadar Loimar. What the Mechaber wants to say is Kishaloi Bitel Rishus Beisai, if he wasn't Mevatel Rishus over his house, he has to lock up his house. Tikisha Bitel, if he was Mevatel the Rishus on his house to the other Bnei HaChotzer, which is something that he can do, which we're going to see shortly in Siv Beis, then mutter lechatchila lahitzi beisai hu v'heim, k'may shekasim Siv Beis. Then we're going to see it is mutter for everybody to transfer from Levi's house, because he was mevatel rishus on his house. He relinquished his rights from his house. That also now belongs to the other Bnei HaChotzer. Ois cut yad aleph, kidei shalayava, he has to lock it up so that people should not come to transfer. U'b'makam atchak, yesh lismach lahakol shein tzarech nilos habayis. The Mishnah Berurah says definitely b'makam atchak, we could rely on this more kuladik opinion that he does not have to lock the door. Okay, let's move along to Sif Beis, says the Mechaber. Until now, we were speaking about a case where Levi was mevatel rishus to Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda. Maybe he was mevatel rishus stam, right? He did it in a general way, and therefore we say he's only being mevatel rishus, the rights that he's relinquishing, the rights that he has to the chotzer, not to his house. However, says the Mechaber in Sif Beis, imbita lahem gam rishus beizai. If he is mevatel the rishus on his house, if he tells the bnei chotzer, I'm relinquishing my rights not only to the chotzer but even to my house, so then imbita lahem gam rishus beizai. Then mutarin bein hu bein heim lahoitzi lachotzer. Then everybody, him, Reuven, Shimon, Yehuda, they all could transfer from their houses to the chotzer. Bein mi beisai, whether from his Levi's house, bein mi bateihem, or from their houses, because he was mavatal the rishus over his house as well. Says the Mishnah Berurah cutting yud beis, bein hu mi beisai hainu. Now the Mishnah Berurah makes a very critical point over here. And really, it's interesting that he saved it till over here. This is something that we're going to learn in Shin Pei Aleph. We're discussing over here rectifying the fact that Levi did not join the Yeruvah Chatzeros by Levi relinquishing his rights to the Chatzar. Now, the same way a person has the ability to relinquish his rights, he also has the ability to take his rights back. Like we said, there's no formal act of kinyan over here. There's no irrevocable sale or transfer going on over here. Levi is relinquishing his rishus, but Levi could also take his rishus back. So if you take a look on Reish Mem Ches Amud Aleph, and you look at Shin Pei Aleph Sif Aleph, the Mechaber says, HaMevatel Rishusai, if Levi is Mevatel Rishus, right? So he relinquished his rights to the Chotzer. And then v'hoitzi achakach mi beisa lechotzer, and then he goes ahead and he takes something from his house to the chotzer. So then the Mechaber is going to say he was chayzer mi bitul rishusai. We look at it as he's now reneging on his bitul rishus, and it's like he's taking his rishus back. What happens? We'll see that in Shin Pei Aleph, but that's an issue that we have to deal with. So there is this concept that if Levi was mevatel rishus, he could still take his rishus back. Against that backdrop, says the Mishnah Berurah over here, nice cut in your base. The Mechaber just told us that if Levi is mevatel rishus also on his house, so then what's the halacha? Then everybody could go ahead and they could be moitzi from their houses to the chotzer, from Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda's house, from Levi's house. Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda could do this. Levi could also do this, right? So we're saying Levi got left out of the Erev. Levi came. He was mevatel his rishos on his chotzer and on his bias to Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda. Now everybody, including Levi, could go ahead and transfer from their houses to the chotzer. So that means Levi walks up to Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda. He says, I'm being mevatel rishos from the chotzer and the house to all of you. Or like the day of Rishayna, Reuven, I'm mevatel my rights to the chotzer and to my house, to you. Shimon, I'm mevatel my rights to the chotzer and to my house, to you. He does it to everybody, right? Now, he could go home, take a pirkei avos, shishanos babayis, and bring it out to the chotzer. That's what we're saying, right? Says the Mishnah Berurah, not so fast. Hainu, is cutting your base. Hainu, this is only true. La'acher shehechziku anshe hachotzer es rishusai. First, what has to happen is Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda have to take what Levi gave them. Levi was mevatel his rights in the chotzer and over his house. Before Levi can go ahead and transfer from his house to the chotzer, the first thing that has to happen is Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda have to be machzik. They have to establish the rights, their rights, over what Levi just gave them. What does that mean, says the Mishnah Berurah? Shehoitziu mi batehem lechotzer. The way this has to work is, Levi says, I'm mevatel my rishus to you, then they have to go and they have to use the chotzer. They have to take items out, or an item out from their house. They have to take a keli sheshavas babayis and bring it to the chotzer. By doing that, they are now taking hold of Levi's rights that Levi relinquished. Says the Mishnah Berurah in the brackets, the kaidem ziku, because should Levi go ahead and use his rights to the chotzer, should Levi go ahead and transfer a keli sheshavas in his house to the chotzer, so that he's using the chotzer, the koidem ziku, if he does that before they do, im yoitzi mibeisa lechotzer, if he takes something from his house to the chotzer, oz chayzer mibituloi, that means that he's taking back what he relinquished. And now once again he's going to aser on them, love, and they're going to aser on him. Like we're going to see in Shin Pei Aleph. Similarly, in our case here in Sif Beis, when Levi relinquished his rights over his house, he has to be careful that he doesn't take a keli sheshavas. Levi does not take a keli sheshavas b'chotzer and transfer it into his own house. If Levi relinquished his rights to his own house, what has to happen is they, a member of the unified Eruv Chatzeros, has to go, take a keli sheshavas b'chotzer and bring it in to Levi's house, so that they take something for the chotzer, bring it into Levi's house. By doing that, they're now making use of the rights to Levi's house that Levi relinquished. If Levi does that before them, then Levi's taking back the rights to the house. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the reason why Sif Beis works, that if Levi relinquishes his rights to his house, now everybody is mutter to transfer from all the houses, including Levi's. Once Levi relinquishes his rights even to his house, now he's completely an outside guest in the chotzer. If he's completely an outside guest in the chotzer, his rights in the chotzer are a non-entity, his rights in his house are a non-entity, they don't aser on anybody else. Ois cut and gimel, Sif Gimel. 4 lines off the bottom in the Mechaber. Says the Mechaber. All right, so Levi was left out of the Erev, and now Levi has to be mevatel rishus. No, he doesn't want to give it up for nothing. He says, okay, I got something valuable, right? My rights in the chotzer are creating a problem for you. You want me to relinquish my rights in the chotzer. Well, you know what? That has value. Pay up. I'll tell you what, I won't just relinquish my rights. I'll rent you my rights. Okay? So, he doesn't want to just relinquish his rights. He wants to rent out his rights to them. Okay, over here we have a machlokes. Yesh Oimrim, we have a Rosh Shemayel, who says it works k'may bittul, like bittul. V'yesh Oimrim, you have a Rambam, you have a Mordechai, that says she'ena moil, that this is not efficacious. He can't rent it out. He has to give it to them bechinam. Says the Mishnah Berurah, she'ena moil sfir lahu. The ones who hold that renting doesn't work, they hold the loitiktu schirus ela ba'akom avaloi b'Yisrael. We're going to see the concept of renting rishus when we're dealing with an Eino Yehudi. When you live in a chotzer with an Eino Yehudi, so what do? You incorporate all of the Yehudim in an Eruv Chatzeros, but there's another entity. There's an Eino Yehudi. Now, the Eino Yehudi can't join the Eruv Chatzeros. You know why? Because we're not interested in Yehudim and Einom Yehudim being unified. We don't want that. So they can't join the Eruv Chatzeros. All we could do is, we could be maskir rishus from them. We could go to them and say, look, I'm giving you $1, and you're renting me, so to speak, your rights in the chotzer. And by the way, we're going to see, Chazal made that takana because they wanted to be uncomfortable for you to be in a chotzer with an Eino Yehudi. Right? We're going to inconvenience you. We're going to make you have an uncomfortable conversation. And by the way, I've had to do this, to go be maskir rishus from an Eino Yehudi. So Chazal weren't interested in making it easy for you to be in a chotzer with an Eino Yehudi. So this Ban Yomer holds, being maskir rishus, that works for Einom Yehudim. It works for Einom Yehudim, not for Yehudim. The Achrayim struggle to figure out why this is. So, before Shir, I looked up a lavush because I remembered that there was a lavush. I remembered that there's a beautiful lavush that explains this, and I forgot the lavush, but I might have it over here. It's not coming to me this moment. 1 second. Lavush says why Schirus works by an Eina Yehudi but not by a Yehudi. I think the reason was because the Lavush says that if he's doing it for Schirus, he's not really relinquishing his rights. When he relinquishes his rights without receiving payment, then we understand that his focus, his eyes are on the ball. His focus is to do what he needs to do. He understands that he has to be Mavatal Rishus in order for the Yeruvei Chatzeris to work. But if he's asking for money, then we look at it that his focus is he realized that there's a way to make a couple of bucks. So, okay, you guys have a problem? You want me to solve your problem? Pay me $100, I'll solve your problem. But he's not really relinquishing his rights. He's just looking to turn a quick profit. I think that's what the Lavush says. Okay, so again, Ice Cutting Yud Gimel, Sfira Lahu, these Mad Yomrim hold, the Leitiktu Schiras Alaba'akum, being Masker Rishos only works by an Eid Yehudi, Avaloi Yisrael. Vayin Bachreidim, take a look at the Achreidim Shechasru. They dig. Limud say Tamlos had to find a rationale for this. So I just gave you the Lavush. I believe that's what the Lavush says. V'amagan Avram Mitzadei, the Magan Avram takes the position the B'chayil L'Kuli Alma Yochel Haskirl. If this is taking place on Tuesday, so they set out to make the Yeruvei Chatzeris on Sunday. They realized Levi didn't become part of it, and now on Tuesday they go to Levi to join the Yeruvei Chatzeris. Levi says, "I don't have any pass. I'll be mevatel rishus to you. I won't be mevatel, but I'll rent you my rishus." Then everybody holds that would work. The like Garami Bittel. He's saying the Magen Avram that if being Mavatal Rishus works, then renting it out for money also works. Ela de B'Shabbos also liskar. Memkar. So the Magen Avram is taking the position that inherently there's no reason why it shouldn't work for Levi to be maskir his Rishus to the other Bnei Achotzer. The only thing is you can't do it on Shabbos. Why can't you do it on Shabbos? Because it's Mekach Memkar. It's a business transaction. And therefore you can't do it on Shabbos. Well, in your halacha l'maisa, El Yerabba Pesach the Ein Schiras Bayelis B'Yisrael Klal. The El Yerabba Paskins that Schiras does not work by a Yisrael. Aval Shari Achrayim Mekilin Bazel Inyin Me'achayel Ka Magen Avram. But the other Achrayim go like the Magen Avram that it does work during the week and not on Shabbos. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Sif Daled. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This list of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua Sefuras Parnas and Shidduchim to those in need. We should be zeichet to see the BSKL Tzedek. B'meherav Yameinu Amen. Be well.